Welcome. It's just gone 7 p.m, Wednesday, the 16th of June, and you are watching episode 11 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight to the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode are my guests, Margaret Shaw, OAM, Co-Chair, Northern Australia Insurance Lobby, a tireless advocate for more than 10 years, fighting for fair and affordable insurance for the residents of Central and North Queensland. Joining Margaret is Andrew Turnour of the newly founded Townsville Lot Owners Group, which is embarking on its quest to redress the horrendous costs associated with the insurance of strata title properties. Before we start delving into the minefield that is insurance in our regions, could you each enlighten our audience to a little of your respective backgrounds? If I could start, please, with you, Margaret.
Yeah, well, I was an IT consultant, but my 30 years in the computer industry were in financial services, general insurance and life assurance. So in 2011, when the property I was living with in Airlie Beach had an increase of premiums for strata of 324% with no warning and no claims, our then treasurer hadn't budgeted to go from 26,000 to 81,000 overnight, and she basically had a breakdown. So I took over from them, became a treasurer for 7 years and started the fight for fair and affordable insurance premiums, with my first email being written on the 11th of June 2011. So I have now done a decade.
And Andrew.
Bill, yes, I've come a little bit later to the insurance situation there, but probably my first cyclone was Cyclone Larry when I first went to North Queensland. My wife's from Reining, moved back to North Queensland, and had always a bit of interest in quality corporate properties in Townsville. Kind of a bit curious, never really paid attention to insurance apart from it was creeping up. But this year, I had time come in December, and the North Australian Insurance Inquiry, the Ep11 report came out, and it just didn't feel right. And we got our new insurance premiums that were horrific. But with a calculator, sat on the couch, had a look at the Ep11 report, and then realised this is not right, something's wrong. So I started calling a few people in Townsville and found some had tears, some were in shock, some were angry. In general, insurance prices have hiked aggressively in the Strata Insurance. So talking to a few people, we got a bit agitated and we decided to get more data and challenge the Ep11 report, because we believe there's many errors in it. And in doing so, we've kind of galvanised a group of people together that and now got a body of data that we can now push back on insurance, saying that the Ep11 got wrong. Our poor politicians have been poorly informed by the Ep11 of what the actual market conditions are. It's our job now, with you tonight, your help, is to start getting more people engaged in the horrendous strata insurance conversation in North Queensland. This has been 10 years or more in the making. Nothing's happened. It's a decade-long project. It's a problem that will not go away until we get some change from the regulators.
Okay, if we can just, in the first part of the conversation, we can just stick to private household or residential owner-occupiers or properties or freestanding properties rather than strata titles.
That's me, yep.
I came late to Queensland. I moved up here in 2012. So you just had Yasi. I think Yasi was 2011.
2011, yeah.
Yeah.
So were the Brisbane floods.
Just as bad. But I did come across the insurance situation, and I wasn't fully aware of the prices that had increased so much. But I was quite fortunate, because after getting here, we just shopped around a little bit and we just struck Yui. and we got the household insurance for, I think, then it started out at about $800, which I thought was cheap compared to what everyone on the John Mackenzie's show was carrying on about. And I thought, what's their problem? So I felt quite happy and sort of, just set it in the background sort of thing. Now, those insurance premiums, they have risen on the property to a degree, but not any of the horrendous sort of things that a lot of the people are sort of informed you about. I think the premiums now just on 1,200, but to get that we've had to put up the no claim bonus to 2,500 to keep it at that price. But there again, we've heard lots of horror stories on the radio. Can you give us a bit of an idea of some of the trauma that some people who have come to you, Margaret, and their accounts?
Well, UE, for a start, doesn't insure in Townsville, so you're lucky to get it in Cairns. They don't offer insurance here. I happen to be in Townsville at the moment and not early. There's an engineer in Townsville who built his own house. It's thicker walls than anybody else's properties. It's got Cyclone shutters. And the cheapest insurance we could find for him was $7,000. Home and contents insurance, and I don't get paid for any of this, so I just want to put that out. I'm not getting commissions. I don't get paid by anybody for anything to do anything. So home and contents insurance started going up in about 2012. There got to be ridiculous at one point where Allianz quoted $17,000 for a new build in Townsville, and there was a quote for $20,000 for a house in Ingham. Because it was in a flood zone. As far as I know, it's never flooded. So it got to be a bit ridiculous. Over the years, I have to admit that home and contents insurance, in particular for standalone houses, has stabilised. The most important factor is a majority of mortgages require that you have insurance. And therefore, a lot of the banks have their own insurance companies. And you can often get quite a good deal from your banks as well. But they don't do strata, which is a different subject entirely. But I think home and contents has actually evened out over the years. There is competition there. You can get more than one quote, but I still think we're paying between 2 and 5 times what the Southern Australia is paying.
This is a matter of interest. We had Larry a few years before Yahtzee, and that didn't seem to generate the same insurance dilemma. It wasn't really until Yahtzee came along that this phenomenon of this high charges occurred. Do you think there's any reason why suddenly in 2012 it became such a major issue?
Yeah, actually, you'll start in 2011 down in the Whitsundays after Yahtzee, and bear in mind that the Whitsundays are nowhere near where Yahtzee hit. Strata Insurance went up between 200 and 600% overnight with no claims. We didn't even lose power due to Yahtzee. There were examples in Cairns of 800 to 1,000%. That's ridiculous. Even the Queensland Chamber of Commerce, in one of their reports, said that they had increases in small business insurance of up to, wait for this, 2,544% in one single year. And they were a bit shocked about that because the previous year, the major one was 1,400%. Now, if you're charging small businesses and you're charging homeowners and you're raising strata insurance to that amount, you are going to stop development. And if they want to open the north, they're well out of luck because they won't be able to do it. Now, after the Brisbane floods in 2011, Brisbane insurance premiums went up 36%. Now, that to me is ridiculous because the Brisbane floods cost more than Larry.
Well, that's one thing I was going to allude to in regards to was the payout as a result of Yahtzee something prohibitive, or or that, because the damaged area, okay, Tully Heads, Mission Beach and Cardwell were severely hit, but if you go north of Cardwell and south of Cardwell, well, south of Cardwell is fairly sparsely occupied sort of thing, and then as you go up to Tully Heads and that, then you've got another reasonable gap. So it's not as though it hit some place like Cairns where there's 100,000 people living and massive property damage. It was fairly surgical, if you know what I mean. And I'd just like to bring up a couple of pictures of Yazzie, well, which I think viewers might find of interest. And there's your logo, Margaret, for your organisation.
Thank you.
And as we just go down, this is basically Cardwell, some of the damage. And I'll just flick through them. You can see the devastation there, but you can also notice the age and the type of properties that have been damaged.
Bill, can I mention that according to the Insurance Council of Australia, who are all know be all, and you notice all those units have still got their roofs on, even though the boats have come ashore. According to the Insurance Council of Australia, the most devastating 15 events since 1967 to today, to last year, sorry. Only 2 of them have been cyclones, and only 1 of them has been in Queensland, and Debbie made number 10.
Yeah,
Yes, didn't even make the list.
I'll just go back to that last screen share. This is the new part near Hinchinbrook. As you say, there's all the boats, but this is the new estate, and you can look at all those houses; they're completely intact. Now, I happened to visit Cairns short time after Yazzie, and I went into that state, and of those new houses, it was really only a couple that had tiled roofs, which is beyond me why you'd have a tiled roof in a cyclone area. And I know the requirements is you've got to wire down every tile, but obviously even that doesn't work sometimes with tile roof. So they virtually sustain no damage other than maybe glass or windows in regards to an airborne strike from an object. So we know now, if something as bad as Yazzie, if the houses are built to standard, there is not really a great problem with the build. They're not going to be adversely damaged by these events.
Well, that's not how they work. You see, the current building standards, including the cyclone standards, are there to prevent loss of life. They are not there to prevent water ingressation. And the Cyclone Testing Centre will tell you quite happily that until the building standards are changed so that damage is part of the building code to prevent damage rather than loss of lives, there will always be damage and there will always be water ingressation. But as you say, the actual loss due to Yazzie didn't even make the top 15 disasters since 1967.
But it was certainly a catalyst for gouging.
Gouging, good word. Like that.
Okay, Alan, we'll just move on to a little bit about your strata title and what you're doing at the moment as a startup organisation. Obviously, getting a bit of guidance from Margaret.
Well, you were talking there about strata, and those photos show how solid some strata buildings can be. They also reported in their report that between 2008 and 2018, a decade, was something like of the order of $1.7 billion worth of cyclone damage in Australia. Of that, only 17.9 million was related to strata buildings in Australia. 17.9 million out of 17.9 100 million. It proves to you how strong and how safe and how well built strata buildings are. But they're very low risk, whereas the insurance companies are not awarding or pricing their risk to the low risk of a strata building. So we've got to bring some facts back to the table now. Gaten said a lot of facts in their report. The first time we now got evidence on how solid strata buildings are and what such low risk they are. If we go back over the last 25 years, back to 1995, there's a report that Margaret put a submission into in 2011 and 2015, and they have cyclone damage data all the way back from 95 and up to 2020, 25 years. There's only been $130 million worth of damage, which averages at $5 million per year for strata damage in Australia. It's very, very low. Now, insurance premiums do not reflect that, which does reflect extremely high gouging. I'll just leave that with you that our strata community has been preyed upon, has been misrepresented, and there's been a lot of misinformation about strata buildings and the increase in natural disasters in North Australia. It's just not correct. So we need to push back to real data and real evidence. Your show, thank you.
In regards to strata costs in regards to insurance, is that partly because of the regulation in regards how or what you have to insure for with strata in regards to likely replacement damage or things like where a person can't even insure their own individual unit for a smaller amount of damage, like just an internal fire that won't affect anyone else? Or is it just the way the legislation is, how you have to insure strata title properties as a whole conglomerate, and there's no real leeway for any sort of reduction in price because of the build or the materials you've got in or the risk that's associated with it?
Well, community titles, every lot owner owns a portion of the insurance and portion of the title. Strata insurance in Queensland is mandatory, compulsory, you have to have it by law. Therefore, you have to take any price given to you. You have no consumer advantage to push back. You have to take what's served up. Home insurance is optional, and the affordability questions, if you can't afford it or you don't like the price, you don't buy it. So you don't have to. And we have 20% of uninsured houses in North Australia, but we have 100% of all stratas insured. So come back to the premium. The premium, basically, they say there's a lot more risk in the strata building. It was just mathematically proved, and the open sea has proven that that's not the case. That's all been misinformation that's been pushed into the market. The strata buildings, as a cluster, have more risk. That is totally not correct.
Is it, like I was saying, is it a bit of a mix between something can be done with the legislation inside the government, and then maybe the insurance companies can operate slightly differently? Margaret, you got?
Yeah, well, at the moment for strata, you have to be insured for full replacement value, as if the whole place has disappeared, including clearing the land, all engineers' reports, 2 years to rebuild, temporary accommodation, blah, 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 blah. There are moves for, I know Warren wants the option so that you can insure for valuation of the complex, as in if you've got 10 properties that are worth 250, 50,000, you can insure for that amount rather than the full replacement value. That might be significantly more. And somebody else has put forward an idea that we should actually be insuring the risk. I mean, what is the risk of a particular strata property? If you were in a category Cyclone 5, it caused an earthquake, there was a tsunami and a bushfire came along. What are your losses likely to be? Now, if your losses are likely to be 7 million and the place is valued at 20 million, Why are we insuring for 20 million when the maximum loss, according to a building consultant, will be at a maximum 7? So I'm kind of in favour of insuring the risk. I mean, before 2011, $800 to $1,000 maybe per unit per year was the norm. Now it's 4,000 to 5,000 is normal. 5,000 to 6,000 is not uncommon. Above 6,000 per unit per year for insurance alone, not levies, is not unknown. There's one in the Whitsunday that's paying 11,000 per year per unit. There's one in Mackay paying 8,000 per year per unit, and you just don't want to be on Hamilton Island, I can tell you.
And that cost has got to be passed on to renters, and if it's a tourist destination, well, it's going to be passed on to tourists and that who are using the accommodation. So it's a horrendous cost added on to either renters or the actual guests of accommodation.
Look, I'm one of those who I lived 15 years in Ellie Beach in an apartment. My husband is 82 next week. We're not giving away my age. And we walked out of our unit. We took a cash offer of 60,000, less than valuation, and we bought a house. But we're unit dwellers at heart. Well, not exactly, but thank you very much for thinking about it. However, we shouldn't have to do that at our age. It's ridiculous. We just walked away and we started again in a house. Now, there's so many people doing that. I mean, there was one guy in Cairns who I contact every now and again to see how he was going. He bought his unit at 180,000, 2-bedroom unit in Cairns. He had a $160,000 mortgage. The insurance premiums, therefore the levies, went up and up and up. He ended up doing 2 jobs, and there was a fire sale, and the unit was sold for 90,000. He said, I will never recover. He will never recover. There are unit owners being made bankrupt because of this. There are only really 2 players in the strata market in North Queensland at the moment, and they're at saturation point. Everybody else is leaving it or has left it, and you cannot get new business. There are over 17 complexes having to go to the BCCM commissioner in Brisbane to prove that they cannot get insurance for their legislative cover, and they're being allowed to legally underinsured. Now, if you're legally underinsured because you've proved that you can't get the insurance you're supposed to have, there's market failure. This cannot keep going on. It cannot keep happening. We've got retirement residential care homes going down. I mean, there's one in North Queensland that their insurance in the last 4 years has gone from $44,000 to $666,890. They are now losing $4 per day per person. How long can they sustain that before they go under? The Presbyterian Church in Queensland is in receivership. I don't know if that's due to insurance, but I suspect there's got to be a lot in there. The church stopped, one of the churches stopped their insurance, and they've gone and created their own mutual so that they can self-insure. Strata's not allowed to self-insure because you can't use a mutual because a mutual is not defined as an insurance company. There's my rant for the night. It's just ridiculous where Strata is concerned. It's stupid, it's unrealistic, and it's causing so much mental pain and anguish and bankruptcy. It's just not fair. I don't want that 99-year-old widows phoning me on the phone and bursting into tears because the first time in their life they can't pay their premiums, they can't pay their bills. It's not right. People shouldn't have to go through this, and there has to be a solution. End of my rant.
Well, actually, just keep going on there in regards to when you started out in your endeavour. Where was your first port of call, and also what support were you able to rally around yourself to sustain you through this endeavour?
Back in 2011, my first port of call with the insurance companies, because I knew them, and quite a few of my friends still work for them in their IT systems. And then I went to the mayor at the time, who was Mike Ronker, who is now a councillor in the Whitsundays. Then I went to the politicians. Then I went. Yep. And every time, I've been through 7 or 8 prime ministers, I've forgotten how many, I kind of lost count, and at least 3 or 4 state governments. And every time there is a change of government, I update my email list and I email every single person on that list, senators and all, and say, are you aware of this? And, you know, you get something back from, say, Harvey Bay that says, oh, but, you know, it's a problem for, etc., etc. And I say, if they can do this to us, they can do this to you. You just wait. And as far as I'm aware, premiums in Bundaberg, Harvey Bay, even down as far as the Sunshine Coast are increasing. Now, that can't be due to cyclones. That must be due to something else. But it's just got silly. I did have 2 people that were supporting me up to a certain point. They were both older people, obviously, over the age of 70. They've both kind of disappeared. Well, not, I'm still friends with them, somewhere around 2013. And up to this year, although I've got a lot of associates, I've been practically alone. But I do now get more Christmas cards from politicians than I do from family.
Yeah, it's a pity they don't take charge. I mean, that's the thing about our politicians. They don't seem to actually deliver anything off their own back. You know, they've got to be corralled into a corner and beaten with a big stick, embarrassed, and everything else, just to get them to sort of even acknowledge the problem, let alone start doing something.
It's across both major parties. It's not just been one. When I first started this in 2011, it was a Labor government, and the first inquiry was held in February 2012 in Townsville, and I presented twice. There were 9 recommendations and none of them were implemented.
But it seems like the government's completely impotent in regards to dealing with some aspects of businesses and that. Yet they're pretty good at interfering with our daily lives or making our daily lives a lot more difficult. So, in regards to...
There's no insurance watchdog.
The other thing
there is for health, but there's not for general.
We did have the insurance people come through and do a few seminars and that on insurance, but they seem to just give you this steady line of, you know, oh, woe is me, and that's they can't do any more sort of thing. In regards to...
It's rubbish, isn't it?
Isn't it? Of course it's rubbish. And the other thing, government, in regards to, there's nothing in this country, including us, that isn't over-regulated and can be controlled by the government. It's just a matter of them knuckling down and decide to do something. So we've got banks in Australia. They need a banking license. They have to work under a set of rules and that, and they get reviewed and there's inquiries into them. There definitely needs to be, to me, either something in regards to licensing of the insurance companies to basically say, well, if you're in the field to insure in Australia, you have to provide insurance across the nation in every state and to all communities. If you don't, well, don't bother doing business in Australia. Go away and just leave the ones that are, or just go back. And if it's the situation where they all desert because they reckon they can't make a bob, well, then we just have to go back to state government insurance companies or something like that. But that's probably oversimplifying the situation. But really, the government has to take some mettle to this cause for its citizens.
George Christensen actually, he is fighting that if you're going to insure in, let's say, Queensland, because I happen to be here and you happen to be here, and you're insuring in southeast Queensland, well, if the population above the Tropic of Capricorn, say, is 25 to 30%, then 25 or 30% of your policies must be written above the tropic of Capricorn. Now, I understand where he's coming from, and it's a lovely idea, and whether or not it will work, I don't know. But unfortunately, Sure Insurance, which is a brand new insurance company, only 2 years old in September, they only insure from Bundaberg North and West. So they would be affected by that because they would be forced to insure in southeast Queensland, and they don't want to do it.
It's
Difficult, isn't it?
a rock and a hard place.
I know.
If I may, Bill.
Yep.
I think you're being a bit hard on the politicians. At the end of the day, I don't think they've been given the correct information on how bad the market is. If you check with the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, you'll see no one from North Queensland has registered a complaint against an insurance company formally. There's been a lot of whinging, but no one's putting in complaints. So until we start changing our consumer behaviour and putting complaints, I'll go as far as to say that since Margaret's been on the job, North Queensland, we looked at the numbers and we believe that the North Queensland strata building community is worth some $27 billion. Townsville, Cairns, Mackay. Of that there, we believe in talking to many of our lot owners, and we went out and got tax invoices from many lot owners, from many body corporates in Townsville, so we have a body of real evidence, not cherry-picked evidence that the ACCC used. We're the only group that have real evidence, and from that we can number up very quickly that we believe over $3 billion has been lost in the North Queensland property market in strata buildings. To go further, there is a government report out that reports since 2014 there's been an 87% reduction in the number of strata units being built in Townsville when you compare it to the Gold Coast. So economically, North Queensland is struggling under the burden of insurance. So what happens is we can bitch and complain about the politicians, but no one's been giving them the right information. The ACCC failed in December to give all our politicians of North Queensland the right information on how bad the market is. They did not tell them how much damage has occurred. They didn't tell the politicians how many complaints have been registered. They didn't tell us how many the Commissioner. And we believe that the whole North Queensland insurance market is a failure of the Queensland Body Corporate Commissioner regulations. We believe 7 of the 15 regulations are not working properly. To finish off, in Queensland, all strata buildings are regulated by the regulator, yet not one insurer that supply the strata industry are regulated at all. There's no price capping mechanisms. So we are being totally abused, but no one's ever reported this to government yet. So what happens is we have to get every lot owner to lodge complaints to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, just on the premium costs too much. That is enough to register an argument with the complaints. They should send copy to their politician. They should send copy to the Queensland Commissioner who looks after all of us lot owners. We only have one Commissioner. And I believe it's the Commissioner's job is to fix this mess. No one else, not the politicians. The Commissioner has a job to do now. The problem with North Queensland is, up until now, no one's been identified as the root cause of the failure. We believe it is the Queensland Commissioner whose job is to fix it. Since Margaret's been on the board, there's been some 400 recommendations to insurance inquiries across Australia. And our Body Corporate Commissioner has not addressed one of them. That is our
So is it a matter of sort of organising on the websites and that a database so people can encourage people to register their increase of premiums over, say, a period of, say, 5 years, the information, and lay that out as a complaint, and then that's on forwarded to the Commissioner? It is a bit of a problem with Australians in general. We're pretty good at whinging, but not very good at doing. And it seems that the people whinge, get it off their chest, and that's the end of it for a while until the next round. But they're just very poor at formulating even something like a basic letter and say, here's a basic letter. This is my premiums in not in 2012, and this is the increases over last 10 years, the breakdown of the percentage increasing, and it's just like, well, that's unfair, and just shoot that off to the commission just on as a matter of course. You know, if you could encourage, say, 10,000 owners to do that, that would have to have an impact, I would presume, and that's what you're getting at, Alan. Is individuals have to take up the cudgel as well.
But that can only be done for strata.
Well, I realise there's two different things, but the strata thing is the one that we're talking about at the moment. With
yeah, it's really bad.
And that's the strata situation. Also, like I say, because the cost is passed on to renters, it adversely affects a lot of the population. So that's the crux of it. If we just, Alan, you sent us some slides. Is there any slides you want us to put up at the moment and talk to?
Well, you can pick up anyone building all with subject material.
Well, I'll just show the first one, and you can just talk to that in the first instance. Right.
This one is our economics is from various university reports and strata studies done around Australia, all on the internet there. But basically, as you can see, there's 340,000 strata schemes in Australia, about 2,000 in Townsville, about 2,000 in Cairns. So that means you've got 20,000 voters in Cairns and 20,000 voters in Townsville. You can see Townsville around about $13.4 billion worth of building. That's a lot of money. It employs about 125 people. But you always see on TV, on television, everyone debates about the GST and the stamp duty. But the Growers Commission there is more. It's twice. It's 20%. And that's still active, as the ACCC reported. Then we come down to the tourism tax that exists on some of our larger buildings. So look at the volunteers there. In Townsville, there's 7,000, and in Cairns will be the same. There'll be 7,000 odd committee people who do this work voluntarily. And the commissioner should be helping them.
Okay then. Margaret, I'd just like to touch on one of the successes that have recently been announced, and that's the government reinsurance pool of $10 billion. Now, my grief with that is, again, it's good old taxpayers' money's being locked aside for this, and we really haven't been able to give the insurance companies a good whack in regards to bringing them under control. From your view of the reinsurance pool, how do you think that's going to play out for householders of standalone buildings?
Standalone buildings. The reinsurance pool is supposed to cover home and contents, strata, and small businesses. It's got a lot of, you define home and contents. The problem with the reinsurance pool, and I've been pushing for a reinsurance pool rather than a mutual for years, because insurance companies say that most of our problems are because they're paying reinsurance costs from an international reinsurer, and they put Asia Pacific all together. So that Asia Pacific region covers the Christchurch earthquake, Sri Lankan tsunami, the Japanese tsunami. So reinsurance costs in the Asia Pacific have all gone skyrocketed. So the theory is this new reinsurance pool, which covers cyclone and cyclone related flood, will lower reinsurance costs for that particular element of a premium, and therefore lower the premiums. There's a number of problems that I foresee, and I've written 2 submissions so far on behalf of 2 different sets of people. Is that it's going down to individual property level, which is good. The present tourism pool doesn't go down to that level. It goes down to 3-tier of postcode levels. So, you know, there's going to be some changes there. A couple of insurance companies reckon they can get cheaper reinsurance because they're backed by American companies rather than international dealing with Asia Pacific. So they kind of want it voluntary, which is fine. I can listen to all the arguments. In theory, and it is only theory, it should lower premiums for standalone houses, should lower premiums. I would guess, and I'm not an expert, about 30%, because at the moment, I think up to 45% of our premiums are reinsurance costs. So if you lower the reinsurance costs, you should lower the premiums. But you're going to make sure that that lowering of reinsurance costs is passed on to the actual consumer. And that is a lot more tricky to make sure that the savings are passed on, which is where the watchdog comes in again. Because if insurance companies got lower reinsurance costs and they don't pass them on, then we're no better off whatsoever. And we do have a problem. We have a problem. In one of the ACCC reports, it was reported that one broker said, if you lower your premiums, you lower my commissions and I'll take my entire portfolio to another insurance company. I think that stinks. I think that stinks badly. And that broker should be named and shamed, but the ACCC didn't name them. But that's what you come up against. And the reason why brokers are doing that is, I hate to get back to Strata again, is that a percentage of their commission, they pay to the body corporate managers that put the Strata business their way, up to 85%. And, you know, to me, that is a complete conflict of interest and should be banned immediately. But for standalone houses, if the reinsurance costs come down, if they're passed on, there should be a significant reduction in premiums. We still be paying 2 or 3 times South Australia, but we won't be paying 5, 6 or 7. That's just my general feel.
Yeah, but nothing happens in South Australia.
No, Southern Australia.
Oh, Southern Australia. I was going to say South Australia.
South of the Tropic of Capricorn.
South Australia.
And yeah, it does. You've got bushfires, and I hate to say the bushfires in Victoria and the bushfires in Tasmania and the bushfires all over the place. They're gonna get hit very soon with insurance premium rises, and they are going to go through what we're going through. And whether or not it will be easier for them, I don't know, because I haven't found it easy.
I think with the bushfires, but there is an element of bad management that goes with that, just rather than just bad luck.
There is.
I mean, and whether somewhere along the line there may be a class action against governments that don't manage their assets properly and allow fires to race out of their holdings into other property holders. So I think that's an interesting one for the future.
And why don't we start with councils that allow houses to be built on the floodplain?
Well, what isn't a floodplain in coastal Australia? I mean,
well, it's true.
I mean, it's slightly ridiculous in regards to Cairns. We've got a very narrow strip between the sea and the range behind us. It's only a matter of a kilometre or less in some areas. And yet they won't let you build up the hill, you know, because it spoils the view. You know, you're cutting into the pristine thing. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't sort of say, well, you can't build up high on the hillside, but you're
going to get flooded if you build down there.
Yeah, and not only that, we couldn't be building anything because all these councils are pushing global warming and sea rise increases. Well, we should definitely be backing away from the coast altogether.
So we all have to move, even me in my new house.
Bill, for your attention, you mentioned earlier where you compare buildings and that there. In the ACCC report, there was an interesting discovery. They have determined that around Australia, you can determine the insurance of a building anywhere in Australia. If you take the premium that you pay, divide it by the building its worth value, you get a number. And everyone below the Rockhampton line, every strata building in Australia, some 330,000 of them, paying an affordability factor, a number around about 1. That means you take your premium divided by your insured value, multiplied by 1,000, you get a number of 1. And ACCC use that in their reports. And they have published since 2007, the last 12 years, that number has been 1 for strata buildings across Australia, and around about 2 for houses across Australia. That means your 1,000th of your building value is your premium, full tax invoice. North Queensland, we're up to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 20. It's just gone through the roof. So we can actually determine that materially, a building in Cairns is the same materially as a building in Townsville, $20 million, $10 million building. Same as Melbourne. They all pay the same material premium for fire or glass for theft. And that would be 1,000th of their building insured value, which has been used all across Australia as the fair affordability factor. North Queensland has been abused over that. So anyone listening tonight, if they take their insurance, their tax invoice premium divided by the value of their insured building, if their number doesn't equal 1, they are being ripped off. So anything above 1 means that is your natural peril or your cyclone loading in North Queensland. But we don't call it cyclone loading, we call it cyclone penalty for living in North Queensland. And that goes all the way back to the original conversation that the economy of North Queensland has been destroyed by domestic home insurance, whether it be a house or whether it be a strata building. It's been destroyed.
Well, the other thing too, in regards to the actual risk and financial exposure of insurance companies in North Queensland, although there are occasional events that are catastrophic and costly, I think sometimes they pale in comparison in regards to the annual cost of thunderstorm damage in places like Brisbane,
Yep.
Sydney, and Melbourne. I mean, it's an annual event, and if it's not just once, a year, but in the summer season, you can have as many as 4 or 5 major hailstorm events in southeast Queensland, Sydney, or Melbourne that do tremendous damage. So added up to all the households that are impacted by the hail damage and the cars. I've been a victim of hail damage with cars, and I'm glad it was covered by insurance, because it's quite frightening what they have to do to get them back online, sort of thing. So still, for the occasional event, although it can be major, it still doesn't equate to the annual damage that's done in our major cities by hailstones every year.
On that, Bill.
No, it doesn't. You're quite right.
Yeah. Margaret's correct there, Bill, because all the, as I said earlier, the affordability factor of 1 means they already have factored in hail, bushfire, flood, storm damage in Melbourne, Sydney, anywhere below Rockhampton. It's factored in, and it's already in the premium. And the insurance companies tell you they make a profit. They're still making a profit with a very low premium, it's only 1,000th of their building insured value. Yet they say in North Queensland at 5 times, 6 times, we only have cyclones, there's not that many of them, or floods, not that many of them, but we're paying a premium 4 to 5 times what they pay down south, and we're paying 4 or 5 times the tax and the GST and the stamp duty and the commission. Some 40% of any insurance bill in North Queensland is 4 times what the southeast Queensland pay. So there's a lot of money floating in this, but no one's ever really done the numbers of what is an affordable insurance, and it has to go back to 1. And anything below Rockhampton has natural peril disasters already included in the premium, like hail, like bushfire. Already factored in.
Okay.
The whole point about insurance is, Bill, it's not a luxury. It is a necessity, and it has to be affordable. And for a lot of people, Northern Australia and North Queensland in particular, it isn't. And that is wrong.
Okay, we've had some success with this reinsurance pool, but now what does the average householder and the average strata title owner have to do to help themselves to get this thing sorted out once and for all to make sure it's fixed finally, and how much effort is going to take by individuals like yourselves going forward. But what does the average householder got to do to help you get this message across and get it changed?
Well, unfortunately, they need to put their opinion into Treasury by Friday as to the reinsurance pool. Now, the questions are simple, and no comment or I can't give an opinion on this question is sufficient. But just have your say. And if you don't want to do a submission, if you just want to have your say, if you email me at whitsundayinsurance@gmail.com, I will put your comments in a submission, my second submission I'm putting together for general consumers who've written to me saying, I cannot answer these questions, but I want to tell them this. And I will put that in that second submission, but it has to be submitted to Treasury by Friday. So if you're not doing anything tomorrow, if you'd like to let me know, it's whitsundayinsurance@gmail, all one word, @gmail.com. I will, but you must put your name and contact details, and you can say not to be published. That isn't a problem. But Treasury needs to know you're a real person and not just me making people up. And I will put it into my secondary submission, which is on behalf of ad hoc consumers that have just said, I cannot answer these questions, but I want to tell them this. I'll do it. Just email me.
Okay, we'll put that up on the Facebook page above the posting of this video to let them know. So that's a start. But
Bill?
After that, because it's short notice, what comes after that?
Okay,
Well, they just have, sorry, let Andrew answer.
Bill, I sent you a submission. If you look at it on how to complain, what's happening, you said earlier Australians don't complain. Well, we have to on Strata Insurance, because insurance companies have reported with various inquiries that no one is complaining. Many people are whinging to politicians, but no one's complaining in writing to the official regulator of insurance in this country. So if everyone can quietly just write a letter or an email to their insurer saying, to their broker saying, I am not happy with the price, please prove to me that's this much. Send it probably to the regulator, the AFCA, probably to the Body Corporate Commissioner, and probably to the politician in writing. That will generate a volume of numbers that cannot be denied anymore. Because prior to that there is no formal complaints registered with our regulators on insurance complaints in North Queensland. It's just barren. There's a lot of noise, but no one is putting pen to paper to complain. They have to change.
So really, it's up to the individuals to sort of, just take 10, 20 minutes and draft a short piece of correspondence and get it to the right people with a bit of your story. And if even if just 1 in 10 householders or 1 in 10 strata title owners do that, that would be a massive influx onto that commission to help them to take action.
Yeah, you got to do it. You can't be lethargic about this. It's too bad. It is catastrophic out there for some people. Totally catastrophic. And some of the homeowners, I mean, a retired couple had a what was it, a $6,000 insurance premium on their house, and they couldn't pay it. They only owed $4,000 on their mortgage, and the house burnt down. George Christensen will tell you that one.
So our project is this Margaret and myself, we're as the public service, but the public, the lot owners, the strata dwellers and house owners have to put pen to paper and write to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority and send a copy to the insurer saying, just as much as we're not happy, proves to us our risks have gone up. The number one complaint is all the prices keep going up, but no one, not even the insurance companies, can put in writing back to you what risks have increased. No more cyclones, no more floods, no more building materials. So the risks have not increased last decade, yet the prices have. So something is not being explained to the public. The strata owner public should ask that question of their insurer and copy in the Australian financial complaints. Then it's registered, and then CAMS and councils become hotspots on the complaints map, and we will get attention. We will get attention.
I suppose to
And
a
for
degree
goodness sake, Bill, if somebody can shop around, because we pay up to 17% in a loyalty tax. Did you know that? If you stay with the same insurer over and over again in a year and you come in as a new client, your premium is likely to be up to 17% less that somebody has stayed with that company for more than 5 years. You are loyalty taxed. And that was in the ACCC report. That's ridiculous.
I suppose that these days with social media and websites, it's quite easy for someone who's organised to put up a form letter where people can just go and grab it and just fill out the details, and it's already got the addressing and that in it for them to do. I mean, is that how much we really have to spoon feed individuals? Because it really does come down, like you say, people whinge in that, but there's very few people who are actually doing. So for those people who are doing something, do we have to go the extra step of doing this sort of thing so people can just, oh yeah, I'll get a form letter, I'll type in a few details, and then I'll send it to the noted recipients? Is that what we have to do for people?
Yes. There you go.
Well, I think yes, because if you would see the amount of tears from our elderly who traditionally inhabit strata buildings later in their life, the amount of tears for fixed income people on pensions and that there, it's absolutely destroying. And they need help. They need community help, and that's probably one reason I put my hand up for community service, because you can see the tears in their eyes when they've got a massive bill that they had to complain or who to complain to, and you have to be web wise to get into it. So tonight, I did send you a copy of the draft letter that everyone should use. You may put that on your website and let them use that letter. That explains the 4 correspondence that should go out. If you'd be so kind to share that on your website with the listeners tonight, that would be very much appreciated.
Just in regards to, I know some of these things are difficult for the elderly who are not familiar with that, but you would think for those elderly who have children, it'd be interested in saving their inheritance rather than let their parents pay a lot in premiums. So maybe they need to get off their butts and help their elderly parents or people who are not as well skilled on the internet or whatever, and do their bit for them as well. So we're not asking too much. If you've got parents who are a little bit computer illiterate and you're skilled at it and they're suffering from these sort of things in regards to the high premiums, you need to do your bit for your parents in regards to get this message out there to the authorities.
Good point.
Got to be done. It's just got to be done. It's a decade of my life, and if I'm getting to the point of I've got to stop sometime and get a life.
All right, we'll come up onto the hour, so we'll just sort of wrap up. You've made it this far, Margaret. 10 years. You've got a win.
Yeah. Hey. No, I've had several wins actually, but this is win.
This is a big win. I mean,
this is a big win.
That's visible to a lot of people. So for you, how much time can you really give yourself to go on with this quest to get it finalised, or can you see someone in the wings that you can hand this mantle over to and let them continue chasing it, or maybe no?
Andrew's doing a really good job on Strata, but it's small business, it's commercial, it's industrial, it's rural, it's home and contents, it's marine. If you're out on a mooring, you are stuffed. It's everything. And this reinsurance pool, I hate to depress people, it won't cover people living on boats. They can't get marine insurance, and if there's a cyclone, they can't come to a marina without insurance, so that's a catch-22. If the Townsville floods would not have been covered, will not be covered by this reinsurance pool because it wasn't cyclone related, it was monsoon related. However, I will work up to the 1st of July next year when this reinsurance pool launches, because everything I've done has been at my own cost and my own time, and it has been a big cost flying up and down the East Coast and getting my husband to drive me up and down the East Coast for meetings with various senators who seem to think that Airlie Beach is just 10 minutes from Cairns. And I think on the 1st of July next year, maybe that will be it for me. It's my swan song.
Okay. Okay, Alan, over to you. You're just starting off in this venture. You do have the idea of at least getting a group or a committee behind you and a bit of an organisation, which is probably going to be a big help, because I know that in any sort of exercise to change things, you really need some people around you to keep the encouragement coming and keep you sustained through the journey. So how do you see yourself and your group going forward?
Bill, I think the final solution is the insurance industry in Australia. There's been so many royal commissions there, but they've always missed the limelight. What happens? We do need an insurance regulator in the country. We need it at state level, we need it at federal level, and we need them in the street with the consumer, not with the insurers. So what happens is we'll be just working quietly away to make sure all our politicians now give thought to having a national and state insurance regulator who can solve all these problems. At the end of the day, the government gets a lot of money, a lot of income out. If they get it wrong, like North Queensland, the economy up here is dying. We've lost $3 billion over the last decade. We'll probably lose a lot more.
Yeah.
No one's investing, no more apartments. People are leaving. And as I said to you earlier today, Cairns is becoming a bit of a joke on the internet about the price of insurance. So what happens is, who can solve that? No, we can't. We can make a bit of noise. At the end of the day, it's a regulator solution, and we need our politicians to install one. That's our final division.
So
Agreed.
So basically the next step really is, besides the individual work you're doing, is somehow get this regulator in place and force the government to put a regulator in place, both at a federal level and each state. Is that a good goal?
That is, if you look at it, in North Queensland, as I pointed out, there's 6,600 body corporates in North Queensland. Of that, there would be roughly 60,000 inhabitants. Of that, there would probably be 18,000 volunteer committee people working on the body corporates. And that's all volunteer labour to run those communities. And those communities are regulated, they have rules. So they're actually the fourth tier of government. You have federal government, you have state government, you have local government. They all have regulations and standards and legislation. And so do the body corporate community. We are very different to home community. And previous regulators have said from the Body Corporate Commission that we are the fourth community, but we have no one looking after us. No one.
Okay then.
Great.
If you just want to, if you've got any individuals you want to thank for during your journey that sustained you, please go ahead and do it, Margaret, because I'm sure there's someone you'd have to sort of acknowledge as a sort of bit of a backstop for you.
It's hard to think of them. However, look, from a political line, Warren Inch and George Christensen, and I'm not saying I vote Liberal or National, have been there since 2011, pushing me along and saying, right, we'll take it to Parliament, even when they were in opposition. Bob Catter, Pauline Hanson, Senator Nita Green, who's Labour, old Senator Janet Lucas, They were all there and they all said, look, do you need us to do something? So, you know, they've been there since the beginning as far as I'm concerned, even though Jan's not there anymore. Because I'm bilateral. I'm across all political parties. I have to be. I just have to be. On a personal note, Lester Riley, he came in 2012, older than me, and said, I'll do whatever you want, whenever you want, and worked for 3 years just sending out emails and pieces of paper and media and whatever. And he's now in Mariba, in a resident, a lifestyle centre. And sometimes I wish I'd joined him. But apart from that, you know, people have come and people have gone, but they get tired after 2 or 3 years. And I really don't know why I keep going. My husband says, isn't it time to stop? And then you remember that 89-year-old who phoned, and she wouldn't give me her name, and she's probably dead by now, who cried down the phone and said for the first time in her life she couldn't afford her bills. That's what keeps you going. And that woman, whose name I don't know, I have never known, all I know is she lived in Cannonbell, has kept me going for 10 years.
Okay. And hopefully, Alan, something is going to sustain you on your journey, because I don't see it being a whistle-stop tour.
And if he says Margaret, smack him.
Well, actually,
I'll turn him off.
there is a pain through the body corporate chair that do affect your emotions a little bit. They are getting knocked around. I'm lucky to have a little bit of time available to look into this and kind of study a bit of the insurance dilemma of North Queensland. But I do get a lot of motivation, a lot of help from just people in Townsville who say thanks for sharing it, just thanks for discussing it. Margaret's a very good mentor to me. But in general, there's a lot of people who do open up in Townsville. They do share. They are a bit shy of the building's name because of repercussion or retribution. But in general, most Townsville people do give us a lot of anecdotal evidence, and many give us a copy of their latest tax-free insurance tax invoice. And from that, we have built a real body of evidence. Nothing that the ACCC or APRA or any inquiries ever had before. They've always used insurance company data. For the first time, Townsville now has its own strata consumer data available that we can now start showing to the government. This is real evidence, and that's what we wish to share with their politicians. I think the politicians need help to get this one over the line. So their job is to help them.
Okay, then I'd like to wrap it up now. But if you just stay online, we'll have a quick discussion after the show. Thank you for watching Regional Wrap. You've been with Bill Bates, Margaret Shaw, and Andrew Turnour. If you enjoyed the show, please like, follow, and share on Facebook, and subscribe to YouTube. Next week, I'll be back. My guest will be Robert Fagan, a geologist of more than 45 years, who will give us a complete rundown on our Earth's history in a time scale, what occurred, what the climate was like, what was living at the time, and how we can interpret that as we go forward. So join me again next week, and with my guest, Robert Fagan. Night.